Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chen, and welcome to the Samfiru Tumarkin live employment law and disability show. I believe we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I am a lawyer located in our firm's Vancouver office. We have offices across the country in Ottawa, Toronto, as well as Calgary. So I'll be here for the next half an hour or so, answering your questions live on anything and everything to do with employment law or disability issues. And what I mean by disability issues are, if you're having some health problems at work, or if you're having some issues with your insurance company, if you've been denied, long-term disability benefits. On the employment law side, as I'm here every 2 weeks, you'll heard me say this a lot, but any issues, there's a variety of issues you can face at work, discrimination, bullying and harassment, being let go, just anything and everything to do with employment law, employment contracts. Please feel free to ask in the next 29 minutes or so, and I'll do my best to answer. And I have a few topics that I wanted to talk about today, but I am going to put the priority to the questions. So I can't see anybody, but hopefully y'all can see me and hear me okay. But if you just type in your questions in the text box in front of you there, I should be able to see it. And then if you have any follow-ups, obviously feel free. And I'll just go in the order that I see them. But one of the issues that I want to talk about today is something I'm coming across. Well, something I'm coming across more frequently nowadays is the issue of mass layoffs and layoffs specifically. Before I became a lawyer, I heard the words layoffs and terminations being thrown around a lot, and I never really understood the difference. Now I think I do, but it's when you hear the word layoffs, it's usually the connotation is it's kind of there's a shortage of work, or there's a mass layoff or something like that, right? And when you hear termination, maybe in your mind you think that the person did something wrong to be terminated. Legally speaking, there's not a difference between a layoff and a termination, right? A layoff is a termination. A mass layoff is just a bunch of terminations around the same time by one company. So if you think about Twitter, I think Meta or Facebook's doing it now too. Twitter's, I'm sure everybody here has probably heard about it. 50% of their employees have been laid off. I think Meta, Facebook, or whatever you want to call it, 10 or 11%. There's some, I know that it's, most of them are in the States, but there's some Canadian employees affected. I think probably mostly in Ontario, probably some out in BC here. So mass layoffs, mass terminations, legally speaking, they mean the same thing, right? It's a bunch of people being let go. The important thing to keep in mind for Canadians, and the States, I'm sure they have similar laws regarding mass layoffs, is at least here in BC, if you're part of a mass layoff, your severance should be higher, right, than otherwise. Then if you're the only person in the whole company being laid off, you're going to be entitled to at least a week, essentially a week per year of service at a minimum, right? With a you're probably going to be entitled, depending on years of service and your position, and your age and other factors like that, you could get as much as 2 years pay. So if you're part of a mass layoff, the minimum's actually getting increased to anywhere from it could be as much as 16 weeks pay in BC. I think it's if it's 100 or more, 50 or more employees, 100 or more employees, or 300 more employees, your severance entitlements, your minimum severance entitlements actually increase. We've got some questions here. So we've got a question here from JX2. ICBC approved physio visits to be used by December 15th. I just settled your case. Yeah, Jax, I think I don't deal too much with the ICBC stuff, unfortunately. So I can't really answer that question. With respect to the disability law that I was referring to, it's ICBC is an insurance company, but it's kind of a different animal. The disability law that I'm any questions about, long-term disability policies or being denied those policies, ICBC's got a very specific set of rules, and I can't advise on that. I'm sorry. We have another question here from Tyler on Facebook. Tyler's asking if you can be forced to relocate after decades at a job. You don't want to lose your job, but your site is moving almost an hour and a half away. So Tyler, that's a good question. I think generally no. The answer to your question is they can't just force you to relocate. I assume you're probably not in a union. The company, it's their business to run, right? They can do as they wish with their operations and move their site or whatever somewhere else, or office somewhere else. It's a question of the degree, right? So how far are they making you move? An hour and a half is too much, right? Obviously, there's a difference between, a longer commute of a minute versus an hour and a half. In your case, you have probably what sounds like a constructive dismissal case. And what that means is the company has changed an essential term of your employment, right? Everybody most people when they're hired, whether it's verbal or whether it's in writing, there's going to be an agreed upon location that you work from, right? And that might be different every day, or that might be an office or a site, but there's going to be an agreement. What's happening in your case, Tyler, is the company is unilaterally changing that agreement. And because they're doing that, you have an option, right? Not necessarily something you have to do, but you have an option to say, no to the employer and say that I just want to be paid out my severance, right? So if you want to keep your job, obviously you have to go along with what they want to do, with what the employer wants you to do. But in your case, because the commute is going to become so much longer, you can say that that's a fundamental change to your employment, and that you reject it, and that you just want severance, right? You claim for severance. So yeah, I mean, it's something to definitely talk to a lawyer about, Tyler, before you do that. Obviously, there's exceptions to the answer I'm giving you. One of them being, I've seen terms in employment contracts that say, we can ask you to move, right, within 200 kilometers. Obviously, if that says that in your contract, that's a different scenario. So Tyler, my advice to you is, I'm telling you, they probably can't force you to do it. You can probably claim for severance pay, but before you make that major life decision, talk to a lawyer about your situation, because there's always exceptions to the rule, and one of them is the written terms of your employment contract, if you have one. And yeah, so Tyler, feel free to follow up if you have any, if you want to clarify anything. Okay, so got a question here. Madeline on YouTube is asking, you're fired for cause due to completely ridiculous accusations. You denied all the accusations in writing, was told that I had no options available to me. You worked at this company for almost 5 years, okay? And do you have any recourse? So, man, you absolutely do, okay? And this, from my perspective, I see this happen a lot. Unfortunately, is that companies will fire someone for cause, and some of those allegations are proven untrue. Some of the allegations are proven just to be completely made up. And so what you can do, first of all, you should do is seek legal counsel, right? Talk about the specific allegations and what you did in response. I think it's very good that you denied the allegations in writing and you put out your position on each allegation, right? You responded as to what you disagree with. Um, you know, the threshold of just cause is very high, not just in BC, throughout the other provinces as well. It takes, especially if you've been within a company a long time, 5 years, and if you have a clean disciplinary history, so you haven't been disciplined for anything before, um, it takes the threshold to meet is quite high. And what you'll see in, if you go through the list of cases that have gone to trial on this issue of just cause in the legal database, employees very, very often win, right? And so employees fired for cause, they sue the employer, taking the position that there was no cause, and the judge agrees with the employee, right? Because if you, let's say I don't know, you accidentally, there was a type, I don't know, you were late for work a few times, right? That's not cause. You made a mistake on, a document and it caused the company some financial loss. That's probably not cause, right? Depending on the circumstances. There's a case from, I believe, Ontario where, a guy at work actually assaulted a colleague, and the judge still said that wasn't cause, right? And so there were very specific, unique circumstances to that case. But just keep in mind, Madeline and everybody else who's here watching, it's hard to meet that standard of cause. Okay, so unless you were like the cases where cause has been proven, theft, stealing from the company, but something serious like that, right? Fraud, stuff like that is probably is cause, right? But a lot of the stuff that companies say relies upon usually doesn't meet that standard, especially if they're using your words, man, ridiculous accusations are untrue, and so just keep that in mind. If you're allowed to go for cause, talk to a lawyer, because the difference between being fired for cause where you get $0 severance pay, and proving there was no cause could be up to 2 years of severance pay, right? So it's quite a lot. It's a substantial amount of money that could be at stake. So, man, hopefully that answers your question. Like I said to Tyler, please feel free to follow up if you like. So, and guys, I'm going to go back to talking about some other stuff, but please feel free to put in your questions. We are live, so I'll be here for the next 15 minutes. For anybody that just joined, any and all questions to do with employment law or disability law, please type in your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. But yeah, back to the subject of this, the subject of layoffs, nations, and mass layoffs. At law, there's really only a distinction between two different types of terminations, and this goes back to Madeline's question. The company can say you were laid off, you were terminated, due to shortage of work or for any reasons that they want, right? But at law, there's only really two types of terminations. There's with cause and without cause. And all these mass layoffs that are happening, for example, Twitter, they would be without cause, right? Because it's due to the economy, due to operational changes, due to the way that Mr. Musk wants to operate his business. So all the layoffs at Twitter, at Meta, if they happen in Canada, that would be without cause, right? And I'll tell you that if they happen in BC, the minimum notice they have to give for all these employees, right, is 16 weeks, is at least 16 weeks. Even if you've only been there a day, these layoffs would entitle you to at least 16 weeks. And that's because under the Employment Standards Act in BC, it's called group terminations. If you're part of a group, of 50 or more people, you're going to get more severance pay. And if you've been with, Twitter or Facebook or Meta for, let's say, 15 years, right? And you're getting into your late 50s or early 60s, your severance only goes up, right? And so some judges in exceptional circumstances in Canada have awarded up to actually 26 months pay. And those are the cases where if you've been with the company for a very long time. And if you're, obviously into your 60s and you were planning on retiring. So I hope everybody keeps that in mind. There's minimum entitlements under the Employment Standards Act in BC, but most people are probably going to be entitled to a lot more than those minimum entitlements. So I think that, and guys, I don't see any other questions. Oh, we got one more here from JX2. If you work on call and your position, so JX2, we got a question. If you work on call and your position gets eliminated, does the time limit for severance start from the day you were informed or from the day of your last shift? Yeah, JX2, that's a really good question and a very important one on the topics of time limits. The clock is going to start from the day you're informed, right? So most people get a letter, let's say today, November 10th, 2022, and they'll say, the letter will say, you were notifying you for termination. Your last day will be December 31st, 2022, right? The clock starts from today, not from December 31st, your last day of work. And that's not just if you work on call, that's for all terminations, right? And in BC, the time limit, there's quite, if you're dealing with an employment issue at work, there's quite a few different time limits that you have to be aware of. And what I mean by time limit is to take action, right? For, discrimination, being fired, being harassed, whether you're federally or provincially regulated. There's a lot of different tribunals and the court that you could go to with different claims. So to sue for wrongful dismissal, which is to sue for your severance pay, it's 2 years from the date you were notified, right? So in my example, 2 years from today's date, if you were given the letter today. If you want to sue for discrimination, if you want to go to the Human Rights Tribunal, it's 1 year. If you want to make a claim for unpaid wages, it's 6 months, right, from the date of your termination. If you're federally regulated and you want to file a complaint for unjust dismissal, it's 90 days from the date of dismissal. If you want to file a retaliation complaint for bullying harassment at work, if you're fired for filing a complaint for bullying and harassment, that's in BC a year. So there's quite a few different deadlines in BC at least. So it's important to kind of, as soon as something's happened at work, you should, talk to a lawyer and see what your deadlines are, right? The shortest one that I know of is 90 days, which is not a lot of time. And so hopefully that answers your question, JX2. So, I see some follow-ups. Your last day was pre-pandemic and they're offering you other work. You were informed a couple weeks ago. If your last day of work was pre-pandemic, which I assume was before March of 2020, I'm just thinking because in BC, there was a suspension of limitation periods for a year when the pandemic started. So Jake, so just clarify kind of what the timeline was. When were you given notification of termination? When was your last day? And what were you informed a couple weeks ago of? And maybe I can, that'll help me sort out the situation. And what's this other work that they're offering you right now? Is it something comparable or something completely different? Okay, so we got a question from Rosemary. Is it possible to negotiate receiving a reduced severance pay if you find another job? Yeah, good question, Rosemary. So if you, first of all, I guess my question to you is why are you trying to negotiate and reduce severance pay? When you've been let go by the employer, anytime a non-unionized employee has been let go, how long it takes the employee to find another job is an important factor in how much severance you get, right? If you find a new job that pays you more the next day, your severance pay is going to be very little. So Rosemary, to your question, I mean, yes, it's possible. If you find another job that pays you less and the company knows about it, then you can still try to negotiate a reduced severance pay, right? If the company knows about the new job, they're going to be able, unfortunately, to get away with paying you less severance. So yes, it's possible to still negotiate some sort of severance, even if the company that you were let go from knows about your new job, especially if the income reduction in your new job. So we've got another question here from Manoush. Can you be put on probation a year after you start a new job? I thought it was just the first 3 months. That's so. I mean, technically, yes. The issue is they still have to pay you severance after the first 3 months. Okay. So what probation does is that it sets a lower standard to let you go, right? So unsuitability. So if they're trying to impose it on you after you've started, they're going to need to provide you some benefit, right? The reason that it's usually the first 3 months is that under the Employment Standards Act, it says they can let you go without any severance in the first 3 months. If they want to extend it past the 3 months, even if they let you go, they're still have to pay you severance. The bigger issue, though, which I see in your case, is if they're just unilaterally putting you on probation, right? After you start a new job, let's say a year in, as in your situation, there's going to be, unless it's part of some disciplinary measure that you did something wrong for them to do that, and unless they provide you some benefit, it's likely that they can't do that. And even if they do, Manoush, and you're let go during the probationary period, you're still entitled to severance. So Manoush, hopefully that kind of answers your question. I'd be interested to know why they're putting on a probationary period, Manoush, after a year of you starting. Okay, I think we got some more questions. Okay, so we've got a follow-up here from JX2. You were in an accident pre-pandemic. Oh, I see. You emailed them a few weeks ago, asking them that's when they informed you work is not comparable. However, they have comparable work in other provinces. Yeah, JX, that sounds like a termination of your employment to me. And so you have, if it was only a few weeks ago, they told you they didn't have any work for you, then that's when they told you that is the date that you start counting from. And so that sounds like a termination to me, and you should talk to a lawyer about severance. If you're in BC, come talk to me about it. My contact should be on the screen, or you can go to our website. But the time started running from a couple of weeks ago when they told you that there was no work for you. That sounds like a termination to me. That triggers their obligation to pay you severance. In terms of they're offering you work on their provinces, you don't have to take that, right? I mean, it goes back to the first topic I talked about is if they're moving your place of work really far away, right, or making your commute a lot longer, you don't have to accept that. And if it's not a comparable job, I mean, it's always a matter of what's comparable, what's not comparable. You're not necessarily under an obligation to accept that new work they're offering you if it's not comparable, especially in pay. And yeah, Jake, so just another thing to keep in mind is it sounds like you're coming back from medical leave. The employer has a duty to accommodate you, right? If you're coming back from medical leave and they just let you go, there could be a potential human rights case there, and it would be discrimination on the basis of your disability or because of the medical leave you had to take as a result of the accident. Okay, so we've got a follow-up here, I think, from Rosemary. She's asking, if you receive a lump sum and you find another position, do you have to pay them back? I worked there 20 years. Just looking at my offer now, and I'm not sure what to do. So Rosemary, it's that specific term has to be, well, it's going to be defined in the settlement agreement, Rosemary. So a lot of the agreements that I negotiate, they're just lump sums, right? You take the money and run. So I've seen agreements where it says, we're going to give you a lump sum or salary continuance, but if you find a job in the next year, you have to pay some of it back. I've seen those agreements as well, Rosemary. If you've been with this place for 20 years, I imagine your severance package could be substantial. Whatever province you're in, talk to a lawyer about it. If you're in BC, come talk to me about it. It shouldn't take me long to look through the offer and tell you if it's fair or not, whether it's negotiable. There's different ways of negotiating what you're looking for, and I think if it's a substantial sum, talk to a lawyer about it. It's very important because there are situations, if the settlement agreement says, if you find a new job, you have to pay us back, then technically that's your obligation under the contract. So don't make any assumptions. Okay, so another follow-up here from JX2. They're offering you work that is quite different. They lost the contract that you worked under. JX2, I think, if they're offering work that's quite different, you don't want to take it. There's two ways this could go down. So number one, right? If you reject that job, they could say that, well, because you rejected that job, we don't have to pay you severance, right? That's the argument that they could make. Your response to that is that job was very different than my old job, right? And the pay is different, or the hours are different, or whatever, right? And so, and if we can establish that, then they do owe you severance. The question of how different the job is from your previous position, that's going to take, we can't get to it on here. It's just going to take probably a phone call or a meeting for you and or you and a lawyer to go through that. I will tell you that unless the job, like if you had a supervisor job, now they're putting you, or if you're a foreman and now they're putting you as just a laborer, obviously you don't have to take that. If they're offering you a very comparable job, depending on what you were doing before and what the job is now, I could see a situation where if you say no, you might not be able to get your severance. But again, I think my advice to you is, it sounds like a complicated situation with a few years of, the timeline spans a few years. So I think talk to a lawyer about it, but it sounds to me like you've been let go and there's a potential that they have to give you some severance, even if they're offering you a new job. Okay, guys, so I think that's all the time. I hope I didn't miss any questions, but that's all the time we have for today. I will be back in 2 weeks, Thursday in 2 weeks, same time. So my colleague Dan is actually on here tomorrow. So if I've missed anything, please feel free to come back and ask him. But for the people who are dealing with situations, feel free to reach out to me if you're in BC. Okay, and I'll see everybody in 2 weeks, and hope everybody has a great long weekend.